think it's a fair tax. I've heard a couple of debates on the whole issue, and there have been people who live in other cities who said they don't mind paying it. And I'd like to also point out Kansas City and St. Louis are the only two cities in the state of Missouri who have the earnings tax. And just by chance, we're the largest cities in Missouri. So I don't know if this is an attack on us or what, but I really think it would be devastating for us if we have to come up with $20 million for the next 10 years to make up for the revenue that we would lose. So I encourage everyone to vote for it on April the 5th. Thank you.
I do support the e-tax. The problem with the e-tax is it all gets jumped into the general fund. So there's no way of really knowing where the money goes. It's like taking a fishbowl, and all four of us putting our money in the fishbowl, and Jim pulls out $10, John pulls out 20, Melba pulls out 15, and I'll pull out 10, and we don't know where the money's being spent. And I do agree that we need to dedicate it. We need to inform the citizens, because if we dedicate it and we inform the citizens and we actually start using the e-tax to provide services that are easily identifiable, then I believe the citizens will want to keep the e-tax. It's like me and John staying together. We pay 40% of the tax. It's estimated that 60% of the tax is paid by outside people that do not live in Kansas City. So if John was my roommate and he was paying 60% of our rent and he wasn't staying with me, I figured that's a very good deal for me. So as a city, we need to keep the e-tax, and we shouldn't be persuaded by outside agencies that are telling us the e-tax is hurting us, because most of the proponents of the e-tax don't even stay in the city. And they do use our services and leave, so it'd be to our benefit to keep somebody paying 60% of the rent as opposed to us paying 100% of the rent, and then they come in our house and they sit on our couch, eat all our food out of our refrigerator, etc., and leave. So we should keep it.
I think we need to renew the earnings tax. It's about 40% of our revenue, but I think after doing that, we need to go forward, and I say on my website, Clever numeral 4 for KC, that we ought to reform it, and we ought to look at all of the general fund revenue, and this agrees with what Brandon was saying, but look at all of the general fund revenue and try and dedicate some of it for specific uses like infrastructure, for maintaining our streets. We spend half, 30 million, half of what we ought to resurface our streets. That's absurd. We don't plow our streets the way we ought to, and we don't fix the potholes quick enough, and we don't trim our trees along the streets, which gives our city a bad impression. If we had a dedicated source of revenue that always went into a street fund that couldn't be tapped, so people couldn't reach into that fishbowl and pull out the money for other purposes, well, then we'd have better streets, we'd have our potholes fixed, we'd have our trees trimmed, and we'd have a good-looking city. So I would like to reform the way the general fund works so it's designated, kind of like the water district, where you pay your water bill, it goes straight into the water department.
If there's one thing I believe I would probably get agreement from my three colleagues, who are all, we're competitors, but I think we have a shared interest in this. I said this, I think, every time we've had a forum, but I think vastly more important than who is elected mayor or any one of our city council races is this issue of the e-tax. It's foundational in terms of the city's ability to not only maintain itself, but as Jim said, to be able to improve it the way that Kansas City looks. If we don't have that, it should be important for people to understand. I've heard a number of people say, well, what's the best way to substitute revenues for that e-tax if it goes away? The problem is here in Missouri, we have a piece of legislation that was passed by referendum statewide, the Hancock Amendment, which says that the major sources of revenues the city might look at to substitute for the e-tax would require a vote of the public. We'd have to believe that the same Kansas Cityans who would vote down the e-tax, which is largely, in no small part, paid by others other than Kansas Cityans, that those same people would then turn around and vote a higher tax on themselves. It's implausible. It just doesn't pass the laugh test.